welcome to UK Crime Book Club. This evening, I'm delighted to be joined by author Antony Johnston, who is going to be here this evening, amongst other things, to be talking about his latest book that is out now called The Dog Sitter Detective. Hi, Antony. Thank you for joining us.
Hello,
and I can see you've got a very professional setup there.
Well, I'm a podcaster as well as an author, you see. So yes.
You see, that's why you've got good sound. Yeah. So we've had slight technical issues tonight. So Sam and Kaz have helped to get us online swiftly as we could, because my computer decided that it didn't want to play tonight. So thank you for everybody for waiting. So I'll give you a little intro, Antony. So Antony is a New York Times best-selling writer and podcaster. For more than 20 years, he's written books and graphic novels, non-fiction, video games, film, and much more. His crime and thriller titles include spy thriller novels, starring Brigitte Sharp. Is that right?
Brigitte
How you pronounce it? Is it
yes.
Brigitte Sharp? Yeah. And The Fuse, a series of science fiction, murder, mystery, graphic novels, even. Also, that you have done Daredevil and Atomic Blonde, which we'll come on to later. So thank you. A really amazing CV there. How do you've sort of had a very, very varied career with video games and graphic novels. So what made you decide to change over to sort of cozy crime and The Dog Sitter Detective?
Well, I mean, the Dog Sitter Detective, as you mentioned, the Brigitte Sharp book. So it's not my first novel.
No.
In fact, actually, funnily enough, my very first published fiction was a short novel. But then I didn't write another one for many, many years. Instead, I got embroiled in, as you say, comics and graphic novels, video games,
Yeah.
all manner of other stuff. And then Atomic Blonde happened. So the short version is that my graphic novel, which was originally called The Coldest City, if you go looking for it, although there is a new edition called Atomic Blonde now, was adapted to film, and that was all lovely. I was a co-producer on the film as well, so I was quite involved in it. But that gave me, I already had a literary agent to deal with some of my graphic novel work, the lovely Sarah Such, and she had been politely badgering me for some years, saying, when are you going to write a novel? When are you going to write a novel? And the fact was that I couldn't afford to take the time off to write a novel. You know, I just couldn't take that time out until Atomic Blonde happened. And then that gave me the sort of the buffer I thought, well, I can now afford to take 6 months off and write this novel that Sarah's been badgering me for all this time. And so that's when I wrote the Exphoria Code, which was the first Brigitte Sharp novel, which is now being developed for TV. So that could be a whole full circle.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that went well enough that I did another one, and and sort of just kept on. That's now become a major part of my life and my work, writing novels. The reason I now have a cozy crime, which most people would not really associate with me, I realize that, is I've always read cozy crime, and I watch quite a few cozy crime shows on TV. I enjoy the genre a lot. But you're right, it's not what I've really written. I've mostly known for things like sci-fi and thrillers, horror within video games, spy fiction, that sort of thing. But what happened was lockdown and COVID, basically.
Good old lockdown. Lockdown's been quite interesting for lots of people.
It really has, yeah. It's so when the first lockdown started, basically in early 2020, I was supposed to start writing the third Brigitte Sharp book. Which is called the Patrios Network. And just as I was starting to plot it, lockdown happened, COVID and lockdown happened. And suddenly, remember, this was pre-vaccines. None of us had any idea what the world was going to look like in 6 months' time, let alone a year's time. And so the Brigitte Sharp books are reliant on foreign travel, geopolitics, the state of the world. You know, she jets around all over Europe kicking and punching people. And we didn't know if that would literally be possible in a year's
No.
time or 2 years' time. We had no idea. And so I couldn't write it. I had to put it aside.
Yeah.
But I can't not write. I mean, many writers will tell you this. It's a compulsion as much as anything. So
Yeah.
I had to write something. And so I decided, what the hell? If I'm not going to be productive during this time anyway, I will write something just to cheer myself up, just to make me smile and make me laugh. And so naturally that led to me thinking, oh, I'll do a cozy crime. You know, it's something I haven't done before. I enjoy
Yeah.
doing new things. And it will make me smile. And another way to make me smile would be if it featured dogs in some way. 'Cause I'm a lifelong dog lover. Just before the pandemic, we'd actually lost we had 2 lurchers for many, many years, and they both
Mhm.
died just before the pandemic,
Oh,
which was kind of a blessing in disguise, to be honest with you, because I don't think they would have coped well with, lockdown and
being
everything.
shut in, yeah.
Yeah. But nevertheless, I mean, as I say, they were old, they had good long lives, but still, painful.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I'll write a book with dogs in it. That'll cheer me up, and I'll make them sight hounds like my dogs were. They're not exactly the same,
No.
but they're not entirely unlike them either. Similar sort of dogs, similar personalities. And I did it, as I say, to cheer myself up as much as anything, and it worked. That's the other thing. I spent about 3 months writing the rough draft of the book, and
Yeah.
the first draft was very, very rough because I'd
As they
never.
sometimes are.
Yeah. Well, mine are anyway, but this was particularly rough because I'd never written anything like it before.
Yeah.
Um, but it did make me smile. It did make me, cheer me up and make me laugh while I was writing it. And when I started, I honestly had no thought of publication. I wasn't thinking about that at all. Partly because it's so different to my other work, and
Yeah.
partly because, like I say, I was just doing it to sort of keep the fingers moving and cheer myself up. And then about halfway through, I just started thinking, A, I'm enjoying this a lot. I'd like to do it again. And
Yeah.
B, it's not bad. I mean, I'm a terrible judge of my own work. I really am. But I thought there's something here, I think. And so when I finished that rough draft, that very rough draft, as I say, I sent it to a few friends, a few trusted author friends
Yeah.
who either write in that genre or at least are sort of adjacent to it. Vasim Khan, Fiona Veitch-Smith, Martin
Yeah.
Edwards, people like that. And said, "Is there anything here? Am I mad? Or actually, is this okay?" And they all came back to me and said, "Well, it needs work," and it did. I won't deny that. Well, like I say, it
Yeah.
was very rough, but they were like, "Yeah, there is something here. This is a good concept. You've got the kernel of a good book here." And so I worked on it, fixed a lot of the problems
Yeah.
that I had with that rough draft. Fiona Veitch-Smith was invaluable to me. I give her a great thanks in the acknowledgements of the book, and I've told her many times that she was extremely helpful in making me realize what the work that needed to be done to
Mm.
get it to a good state. And then I did nothing for a year. I didn't even tell my agent that I'd written
Oh,
it.
really?
I didn't tell my agent that I'd written it because at that point, you see, vaccines were on the horizon.
Yeah.
And so I went back and wrote the third Brigitte book, the Patrios Network.
Ah,
And then I had to deal with all of that, obviously, get that edited and out the door. And only then, when that was done, did I then email Sarah. I spent a day composing the email to Sarah, my agent, because I just didn't quite know how to explain that
by the
I, of
way.
all people,
Yeah.
had written a cozy crime book. Luckily, Sarah is a wonderful agent, a good friend, and very used to me doing strange things. And so she did not explode when I
No.
told her what I'd done, uh, and actually really liked it, thank goodness. And so, yeah, then obviously we went through the usual process of polishing it up and
Yeah.
pitching it to publishers, and we found our home with Allison and Busby. But it is a strange and long story to get
No,
here.
no. I mean, it's a great I mean, I knew that it would be I mean, it's such a sort of a shift, isn't it, from your sort of, I mean, I guess you would have called it your day job back when you started writing.
I suppose,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Um, but yeah, no, I was fascinated with that when I was reading your sort of CV and things, and your introduction. I was like, whoa, this is really different. This is like really different, because even like your thrillers, although you've done crime thrillers before, this is so. Basically, would you like to tell us a little bit about the Dog Sitter Detective, so that people who, if they haven't read it or they're interested, will know what we're talking about?
Yes, of course. So the Dog Sitter Detective is the story of Guinevere Gwynnie Tuffle, who is a retired actress who she retired 10 years ago to look after her father, who was ill. He's now passed away, and unfortunately, she realizes that she's now penniless. All he's left her is a couple of grand and a broken down old house in Chelsea that needs a lot of work. And so she has to try and revive her acting career at the ripe old age of 60, which is no mean
No.
feat. So there's all of that pressure on her, but a more immediate concern is that her best friend, Tina, another actress, a much more successful and wealthy actress, is getting married for the fifth time, this
Yeah.
time to a wealthy Italian business magnate, the head of an olive oil empire, at her country house, Hayburn in Hayburn in Hertfordshire. And naturally, Gwynnie has been invited to the wedding. She's not a bridesmaid because she didn't have time to, go
No.
through all of that. So she goes to the wedding, and of course, the wedding is full of industry people. It's full of other people from, the
Yeah.
acting world. And so she's feeling rather isolated, but she meets up with an old friend. Tina's delighted to see her and finds herself looking after a wedding present, a strange wedding present in the form of a pair of Saluki dogs that have been
Yes.
gifted to Tina by the bridegroom's family. And as if all of that wasn't weird enough, just as the wedding is about to actually begin, there is howling and screaming from upstairs in the house, and the groom is found dead in the library. Very
Love that.
quickly, the police believe that Tina did it. Gwynnie is absolutely determined to prove that she didn't, and so undertakes an investigation of her own while also still looking after the dogs.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, I love the murder in the library with without giving too much away, the strange murder weapon. It was very Cluedo-esque.
I mean,
I love.
why mess with the classics?
Yeah,
I'm not going to
yeah,
do
exactly. No, I
I'm not
loved
going to
it.
do Body in the Library every book, but I figure
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
didn't
no.
know this was going to be a series, so I thought like I say, I was writing it for fun. I thought it would just be a one and done, so I was like, well, why not have a Body in the Library?
Well, that's interesting, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, was actually, did you know when you started that whether it was going to be a series? Because this is book one.
That's right.
So you had no idea that Gwynnie would grow and become a series.
No, and like I said, it was about halfway through when I first started to think, oh, there might be something here that could be published. And I suppose it was around that time because it's crime, and obviously crime, so much of the crime genre is series that naturally, once I started thinking about publication, I did,
Yeah,
hmm, okay, maybe this could be a series then. And so that actually did affect how I wrote the rest of the book. The second half
interesting.
of
Yeah,
the rough draft, kind of has that in mind a little bit more than the first half, the original first half did. Obviously, it's all been revised and rewritten now, so that yes, it will all work as the first book in a series. But no, that wasn't when I first started writing it. At least that wasn't something on my mind. But like I said, I had such a good time writing it that yeah, I would like it to be a series. It is. We've got a second book coming out in January. Um,
excellent.
the publisher has an option on a third. So if the first two books do well, they'll hopefully take that option up. And then who knows? I mean, Alison and Busby, one of the reasons I was very happy to go with them is they have a lot of book series. They do, there's Jim Eldridge's books,
Yeah.
and Martin Edwards, obviously, and
Mhm.
that all manner of titles they have that are quite long running series with eight,
Yeah.
9, 10 books in the series. I'd love to do that. with the dog sitter detective. Who knows? You know, it's out of my hands to a large extent, but I would very much like to be able to do that.
So I've got some questions or some comments and questions that are coming through. So I can't see the names. I think that's because it's not my account, but I'll say I love Antony's writing. Can't wait to try his cozy crime and also his graphic novels.
Oh, thank you.
Laura says hi. And I think that might be Kaz that says slightly jealous watching Antony as a legend. Love interviewing for him for our Spook Fest last year. So I think that's probably Kaz.
I had a lot of fun.
And Mills says that she loved the dog sitter detective so much, as did I, because I thought I really liked Gwynnie as a character. I liked the fact that she was an older woman. I liked that she'd had a past. I liked that Tina had a past as well, but you know, they had that past together. They were interesting women. And I thought that I think they came across as being quite fun. And I wondered whether that was because you were having so much fun writing them, because it does come across that way.
I hope so. I hope so. I think that's just speaking more generally. I think that's always the case. If I'm having fun writing something, it will come across. If I'm excited writing something, that will come across. I believe
Yeah.
that very strongly. That whatever you feel as an author writing it is what an audience will take from it. And I've had the most success I've had in my career has come when I am writing something almost for myself more than for the market or whatever.
Yeah.
There are some things like Atomic Blonde, actually. When I first wrote that, nobody in comics was doing graphic novels like that. It was commercial suicide. There was the idea that this might sell gangbusters and sort of make a fortune. No, it was absurd. But I felt I needed to do it. It was a real
Yeah.
passion project. And I think that came across, and that's why it was picked up and adapted. And I've had other works like that, as I say, along the way. So I think, yes, that does come across. I really had fun writing Gwynnie. I had fun
Yeah.
writing Tina. I had fun even writing, the Dowager Lady Ragley, her nosy neighbor,
She was funny.
yeah, it's just, like I say, I wasn't I wasn't holding back in terms of
No.
having fun. I was letting myself have fun as an author. And yes, I think that as a result does come across in the book. I certainly hope so.
No, it definitely does. And I sort of, when I was sort of reading it, I thought I could definitely imagine it being a TV sort of show that, sort of, I mean, I love like Midsummer and Agatha Raisin, and, I could just
Barbara
imagine,
Brown.
yeah, I could imagine Gwynnie as a sort of Agatha Raisin-esque, quite a glam. I sort of, what's she called? The lady that plays, I can't remember what she's called, the blonde lady that plays Agatha Raisin on the TV series. I can't
Sorry.
remember her name.
Mind
If
blank.
anybody,
I can't remember.
yeah. But I could imagine her Gwynnie is obviously, she's a retired actress. I sort of thinking, did you sort of think when you were writing them, could you sort of visualize what they looked like in your head, or were they sort of, do you sort of think about that? Because I guess being a graphic novelist as well, that's quite a big part of it. Is it having to visual?
Yes, and I do have a fairly visual imagination. I was a graphic designer for years before I became a writer, so I do sort of
Yeah.
have a very kind of visual mind. But Ashley Jensen, I just saw somebody mention
Yeah.
it in the chat.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam.
But what I don't do is sort of cast real actors or real people
Yeah.
in the roles, which I know some authors do. I'm not criticizing it as a practice.
No.
But for me, I do. So I have an image in my mind of what Gwynnie looks like and what the Dowager looks like and what Birch looks like. We
Yeah.
haven't even mentioned DCI Alan Birch retired,
No.
her sidekick. I have an image in my mind of what all these characters look like, but it's not based on an actor or actress. It's it's just a sort of imaginary picture.
Yeah. Yeah, so we will come back to Birch in a little while.
All right.
But yeah, so I think I won't give too much away, but at the wedding, when the murder happens, Gwynnie is sort of, her hand is sort of forced, isn't it, really? What like you said about Tina, and she sort of gets, accused of, and the police would say they're not maybe doing their job as well as she thinks they should. So this is why she then enlists the help of her friend to try and prove that Tina is innocent. Was it difficult to write the book in a way that you gave away enough, but not too much?
You mean in terms of the mystery?
Yeah, so like you give the clues so that people, there's that thing, isn't there, about, if you give them enough but not too much. Was that difficult?
Yes, but it always is. Um, it wasn't any more difficult in this book than in other mysteries I've written. And the truth is that almost everything I write is a mystery.
Yeah.
Even though it may not necessarily be crime or it may not
No.
be a cozy like this, some kind of mystery, even in things like my sci-fi and superhero work,
Mm.
is pretty much at the heart of everything. That's because that's just the sort of story that I like to write. So I have had a lot of practice writing
Yeah.
mysteries. I won't say that makes it any easier because it never actually seems to get easier, but I do at least know how to do it. What
Yeah.
I'm doing in terms of, as you say, like laying the clues, plus red herrings and misdirection.
Yeah.
Um, I believe in a book like this, I believe very much in playing fair with the audience. So I want the audience, when they get to the end and the killer is revealed, not necessarily to have worked it out themselves, hopefully
No.
not, but to go, "Oh, yes, okay, I see that now. I see how that happened
Yeah.
and how that worked." That's very important to me in this sort of book because as a reader myself, when I'm reading a mystery, if I get to the end and suddenly some person you've never heard of before sticks their hand up and goes,
Yeah.
"Actually, I'm the killer," and it's for this motive that has never been mentioned, or even hinted at, I get really angry about
Yeah.
that. So I didn't want to do that. I am my first and most important audience. Everything I write, if I have to like it first, you know?
Yeah.
And so yes, I will always write the kinds of books that I want to read. And in this case, that means, as I say, playing fair. I'm not going to go to the trouble of writing a clue finder, things like
No.
that. I'm not that bothered about the golden age, but I do at least want it, yeah, as I say, to kind of to feel like it's playing fair. As a lot of cozy TV shows, I think, are actually very good about this, more so
Yeah.
than some novels. You watch something like a Rosemary and Thyme or a Midsummer or a Father Brown, and
Yeah.
the clues are always there. The mystery, especially in the shorter ones, may not always be as sophisticated as in a book, but
No.
the clues are always there. They do play fair, and so, or Death in Paradise is another good example. And so that's, as I say, that's important to me.
Yeah, I think I'm the same as you, is that I want to have that belief that I don't want to guess who it is, because I like to not guess. I didn't guess who this one is, so that's good. But I also don't want to be like, what? Like when you have
Yeah.
that, or like a real
"Oh, who's
curveball
that?"
and you're like, I yeah, where did they come from? How did that
Yeah.
happen? Or yeah, or that it's not believable, because I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Is if it's not believable,
It has to be
um,
plausible,
or
yeah.
it's something like, yeah, definitely, yeah. And I think that's where, I guess, like the cozy crime genre, really, because it does tend to use real life situations, maybe a little bit, if you're thinking of some of them, maybe a little bit far-fetched, but not massively. It's, you can believe it. And if you get killed by a cheese or a or a wine bottle or whatever, it's okay, as long as you can, like you say, you play fair. I think that's what the audience want, really. So
Absolutely,
um
yeah.
have you got, I was going to ask you, actually, do you have a favorite crime writer? And we've got a question saying, what are your favorite cozy crime authors? So I guess that's a two-part question. Is I was going to ask who your favorite crime author is, and are you sort of do they influence your work at all? And then we've got cozy crime as a part of that,
Specifically,
because of, yeah.
yeah. Um, Funnily enough, I just got asked this question, in an interview, the other day. So I don't have a single favorite author. I read very widely within the
Hmm.
genre. I mean, part of that is because, and people may not realize, I'm the vice chair of the Crime Writers Association. Um, and so it's kind of, I feel it's my duty to read
Yeah,
a pretty broad
broadly.
range of authors.
Yeah.
As a result, I couldn't point to a single author and say that author's my favorite.
Hmm.
But what I do have is a kind of short list of authors whose work I will pick up sight unseen.
Yeah.
You know, I will always read a book by those authors because I know that I'm probably going to enjoy it, you know, on a balance of probabilities. And those are people like Fiona Veitch-Smith, Fassin Khan, Steve Kavanagh. Absolutely
Yeah.
love Steve's
Hmm.
thrillers. Um, uh, Now my mind's gone blank now after I've
I know that
listed
always that's put
those
you on the
three.
spot question.
Yeah, my mind is soup. Who else? Well, outside of crime as well. So I read a lot of sci-fi. So Lauren Bucas
Yeah.
is a great favorite. She's a sci-fi writer. William Gibson, you know, people like that. Within cozy, um, favorites and people along those lines specifically are Julia Chapman, who
Yeah.
writes the Dale's Detective
Hmm.
Agency series. Love those. I live actually not far from the Dales myself here. I'm in Northwest
Oh,
England.
really? Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
So and my partner is from Yorkshire. So yeah, you know, they kind of those books very much ring true. All
Yeah.
of even though the village is fictional, I recognize every single person in those books. Yeah.
That's
Um,
small village, isn't it?
it really is, yeah. Kate Collins, an American author who writes the Flower Shop Mysteries.
Oh, I
I
don't think I've heard of those.
They're I think she's up to like book 20 or something by now. They
Oh,
are very much in the American style, which
yeah.
is the kind of almost soap opera as much as detective
Mm.
story. But I do like them. Her characters are great. She has a very witty way of writing. And I do enjoy there's a very particular American subgenre, which is a middle-aged woman with a quirky job or hobby who stumbles across murders whilst experiencing a complicated love life. It's a very, very specific subgenre, but I do like it when it's done well. And yeah, Kate Collins does that very well. Who else? OMC Beaton, of course. I love the Agatha Raisin.
Yeah, the
I'm not
Agatha
so much
Raisin's
into
amazing.
Hamish. Yeah, I'm not a Hamish Macbeth person as much, but Agatha Raisin I love. Makes me laugh like a drain.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just a few, you know, a few favorite authors.
Well, used to work in libraries for many years, and the Agatha Raisins I didn't read, but I knew that they were like the ones that just as soon as they came back in, they'd go back out again, and the paperbacks
Right.
were always well loved and thumbed, and there's so many of them as well.
She wrote 30 plus books or something before she
Yeah,
died. Yeah, crazy.
yeah.
Oh, Mick Herron, that's another of the
Yeah,
authors that the
the
slow
the one that's on
horses.
yes, that's it, Slow Horses, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I think it's Kaz says she calls them her "shut up and take my money" authors, the ones that you can buy sight unseen.
Yes, exactly. Exactly that, yes.
So, she also says, I think that she says that she discovered the genre through Charlene Harris, who's not someone you always expect to write cozy crime, which is the Suki Stackhouse. Um,
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, yeah.
she wrote the sort of, well, which is a True Blood series was written around. But yes, I remember they were another ones that were really sort of popular with library readers and
Mm.
so yeah, I think people were always really fascinated with what other people like to read. Um, I've just got into the British crime classics, you know, the
Oh, yeah.
British library ones, and some of those are amazing.
Yeah, I've got a few on my shelf, from the British Library editions,
Yeah,
and, yeah, there's a few, like, John Dixon Carr ones and stuff like that in
yeah.
there.
Yeah, that's somebody who I discovered through interviewing Tom Mead on here, who I'd not heard
Alright.
of him before. So
Yeah.
yes. Um, so you said you're writing at the moment. Are you writing book? Have you written book two? Is that has that flown off to the editing process, or is it past that?
Not to the editing process yet. So I've finished the rough draft of book 2.
Yeah.
Uh, and for my process, the way I work is after I finish the rough draft, well, I finish the very rough draft, which I call the zero draft. And that really is just, that's only for my eyes. Nobody else sees that. So I finish that. Then I go through and fix and polish up everything. And that's what I call my rough draft. I then send that to my beta readers. That goes to some trusted friends,
Yeah.
other authors, a couple of readers as well, who I know will give me good feedback and
Mhm.
are able to read a book knowing that it's not finished.
Yeah.
and sort of understand that I'm looking for pointers to, oh, you could fix this here, you could change that around, that sort of thing. Tell me whether the mystery works. Tell me, were you surprised when you find out who done it? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's out now with them. I sent it to them just a couple of weeks ago. So I'll be getting feedback from them at the end of the month. And
Mhm.
then the deadline for me to send it to the publisher is the end of June. So at that point, then yes, it will go, well, first to my agents and then to Alison and Busby, and we'll get that ball rolling. At that point, then I have to decide whether I'm going to start writing book 3, because as I say, they have an option on a third book, but
Yeah.
I don't know. There's no guarantee that they'll take that option
No.
up. So I have to make that decision. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to see what the reception to the Dog Sitter Detective is first to see how good I feel about that.
So will it be the Dog Sitter Detective? So it'll obviously be book 2, but do you have a title, or is it just still in working title at the moment?
The title at the moment is Death in Little Venice,
Oh, nice.
and it is set in Little Venice in London.
Venice.
Yeah.
Yes. That was, yes, I went to London the other week, and the first time I'd sort of seen it we were staying at Paddington Basin, which is just up the road from,
Yeah.
yeah. And I sort of, it was late, so we didn't go, but I really wanted to go and have a look because I'd never actually seen what it looks like. So I'll have to probably live it through Gwynny.
It's lovely. There are quite a lot of residential houseboats there. So what I've done, it's I won't give too many spoilers or anything away, but basically,
No.
Gwynny is hired to look after a border collie belonging to an aging rock star because he's about to go off to Ireland to play a couple of gigs, and
Right.
so he hires her to look after the collie over a bank holiday weekend, and which she does, and stay on his houseboat. He lives on a houseboat in Little Venice,
Yeah.
but a couple of days later, his body turns up in the canal. It turns out that he never made it out of London, and so
Ah.
the police are convinced it's an accident, and now it's up to Gwynny to prove that actually it was murder.
Oh, wow, that sounds so good. I want to read that now.
I haven't finished it yet. You can't.
Can't wait until January. That's too long. Um, I was really interested because obviously you could tell as well that you said at the beginning that you're a big dog lover, and I could tell that from and I'd not heard of Salukis,
Salukis,
sight
yeah.
hounds. Yeah, so they're a sort of breed of lurcher. I googled them because and then I sort of recognized them. Are they on Crufts? Because I sort of
Yes.
that sort of stance. I thought I'd seen them on Crufts because
Yeah.
they've got a very sort of elegant way of walking, like almost like trotting.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
they're furry greyhounds, essentially.
okay,
Um,
yeah.
I mean, they're not, but they're very closely related. All of the
Yeah.
sight hounds are, kind of related. So just to put you up on that, and this is the sort of dog pedant that I am. So lurchers are actually not a breed. Lurchers are a
Oh,
type. Yeah. So you'll
a
never see a
type in a
lurcher.
breed.
You'll never see a lurcher at Crufts
Ah,
because they're not a breed. Salukis are a breed. They're a pure breed, as are
yeah.
greyhounds, whippets, and other Afghans and other sight hounds like that. Lurchers are, so strictly, technically speaking, a greyhound crossed with either a collie or a terrier is a lurcher.
Ah, interesting.
Realistically, any cross of sight hounds gets called a lurcher. Technically that may not be true, but realistically, if you cross any number of sight hounds together or with other breeds,
Yeah.
what you've got is, most people will call it a lurcher. So our dogs they both had Saluki in them. One of them was part
Yeah.
Saluki, part Greyhound, and we think possibly part German Shepherd. Not actually sure. And the other was part Greyhound, part Saluki, and part Whippet. So she was quite a bit smaller than the male.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were lurchers, but as I say, lurchers aren't a breed. Salukis, however, are, which is why these dogs are, so expensive and
Salukis.
valued.
Yeah. Because they looked really gorgeous, and I thought they sort of they added, I think, a bit. They needed the glamour, weren't they? Well, they were a present, weren't they, for her for
That's
the
right.
wedding? So, and I think because you had the whole, they had to be sort of a glamorous dog. You couldn't really have anything else, I think, for her. Um, with the sort of the funness of the writing the book, and does it sort of, so you went back to writing your third Brigitte, was it Brigitte?
Yes,
I can't
Brigitte
remember
Sharp.
which
Yeah.
was it difficult to go back to writing her, or did you sort of almost like sort of go, okay, this is what I do now. This is what I do. I'm going to go back to that. And so the cozy crime is more of a, I don't want to say it's like a hobby, because it's not a hobby, but do you know what I mean? It's not, it doesn't feel like as much work as your other work.
Ooh, I don't know whether I'd say that. It really is. Having just done that second book, believe me, it was no less work. Even though it may be
Really?
like 20,000 words shorter, it's no less work than any of the Brigitte
No.
books. I think, I mean, it was a bit of a whiplash, obviously, because the genres are
Yeah.
so different, and Brigitte as a
Mm.
character is so very different to Gwynne. Um,
Yeah.
but it was the third Brigitte book. So, you know, by that time, I'd been living with Brigitte in my head for 4 years or something. So, it was
Mm.
easy to kind of slip back into that mode, if you like, or no more
Yeah.
difficult than at any other time. But it was, yeah, there was a bit of momentary whiplash. But my career, basically up until, you know, even now, is kind of based around jumping around from job to job and juggling lots of different projects. I've just done that my whole life, my whole career. In comics and
Yeah.
graphic novels, you kind of have to. That's part of the business, is that you're always
Yeah.
writing multiple things at once. So, like I say, jumping around from project to project and from medium to medium. You know, when I started writing video games, I was still writing comics. And you know, when I started writing novels, I was still writing video games. I still am writing video games. I had a meeting about one just today. So yeah, that kind of swapping around and jumping around from project to medium is actually quite normal for me. I've kind of gotten used to dealing with that whiplash. I even wrote a book about it. I have a book called The Organized Writer, which is literally about how to do that.
Oh, really? Well, that's interesting, because I was going to ask you about because looking at your sort of your bio and how much you do, you obviously fit quite a lot in. You said you're a podcaster as well. So do you have a writing routine? You know, it's obviously it is your full-time job. It's not like, some authors sort of slot it in
Mm.
amongst other things. And I guess you do in a way, because you have such a varied career. But how do you sort of, do you get up and, are you an early writer? Are you a sort of a block writer?
I am an early writer. So the way I do things is I get up, I sort of take care of necessary life things, you know, breakfast, all that sort of stuff, you know, brush my teeth.
Yeah,
And then I sit down and start working. And I do that before. I don't check my email. I don't go on Twitter, none of that. I sit down and I immediately start working. And I work to a minimum word count every day, or page count in the case of scripts. Um,
yeah.
so for when I'm working on a novel, my word count is 1,500 words. So every day I write 1,500 words at least. Sometimes
Mhm.
on a good day, I'll write 2 or 3,000. You know, it would sort of, if it's flowing and I'm feeling good, I'll just keep going. But as
Yeah,
long as I hit that minimum 1,500, then I know I've done enough work for the day, and then I can check my email, do social media, relax, maybe, you know, read a book or whatever, and not have to worry that I'm falling behind. That's why I set myself a word count rather than a time count. So there are days sometimes where I'll sit down and I've done my word count in like an hour and a half. And that's it. And the rest of the day, I, you know, do admin and reply to emails, or as I say, read a book, whatever.
yeah.
But then there are other days when writing those 1,500 words is like pulling teeth, and it will take me until 4 o'clock in the afternoon before I am done. You know, those days are not very fun, but they happen to every writer. But
Mm,
again, the point is that at that point, I know I've written what I need to meet my deadlines for that day.
yeah.
So that's my daily routine, if you like. And then in terms of juggling projects, I try only to work on one project a
I was
day.
just about to ask you that. Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
do you try and just, because I guess that would be confusing, in the least, especially when you're swapping from one genre to another.
It can be done, and I have done it. You know, occasionally you fall foul of the scheduling gods,
Mm,
and I find myself doing, yeah, writing a chapter of a book in the morning and then writing a script for a video game in the afternoon or something. I try not to do it, and I certainly try not to do it for extended periods of time, but
yeah.
sometimes it's unavoidable. But I'm very fortunate in that, you know, there's only me and my partner here. I don't have children to look after and take up time. I had the dogs, but that was, that was all. Um, and yeah, and as you said, this is my full-time job. So
Yeah.
I'm able to kind of stay on top of things as a result of those, say quite fortunate circumstances.
So Laura's asking, are there any genres you just wouldn't attempt?
I don't think so. I've written rom-coms. I've written westerns, I've written horror, I've written gangsters, spies, sci-fi, fantasy, now cozy crime.
Yeah.
Yeah, eh, all that all that I require is for it to be interesting.
Mm.
For me to be interested in it, and for it to be interesting enough for me to think, "Oh, I've got a good idea for X." If that's the case, then I will give it a go. And I mean, look, some of my books have been more successful than others creatively. I would say, I can admit, I'm big enough to admit, if you like, that some of my things are more successful creatively than others. There are some I've written, had a go at, and at the end gone, yeah, okay, that wasn't my best work. But I'm always willing to try any,
Yeah.
because why not?
My husband has a question. My husband's a big comic book fan. And so I said I would ask this one for you. So, do you prefer to write as part of an existing universe, like the Marvel universe, or do you prefer to create your own like this one?
I generally prefer to create my own.
Yeah.
It's fun, as we in the industry we call it playing in someone else's sandbox.
Yeah. That's
When you
yeah,
write,
that's a really good analogy.
yeah, in the, you can have a lot of fun in the sandbox and you get to play with all the toys, but it is
Yeah,
someone else's
it is
sandbox.
not yours. Yeah,
It's
you're
not
just
yours.
no.
Um, and so I do generally prefer to create my own. However, that said, like I said, it can be fun to work in another universe, and especially, and this is how I like to do it, if you can find the nooks and crannies where nobody else has looked before, nobody else has shone a light in this nook,
Yeah.
this particular, crack in the wall or something before. Find something like that where you have a bit of freedom because it's not pre-established, and that's
Mm,
actually a lot of fun. That's the sort of thing that I like to do and tried to do when I was working for Marvel, writing things like Daredevil, was find the bits that haven't been looked at before. And that way,
yeah.
yeah, I can have, because that is more like making my own thing then, and I can have a lot of fun doing that.
And I imagine the sort of the pressure. Is there a pressure when you're writing for someone like Marvel, which is less in your, or do you put as much pressure on yourself than you know?
I put as much pressure on myself, and
Yeah,
maybe that's to my detriment. Maybe I'm a fool for doing so, But I've never been, and I have written, sort of work for hire stuff that needs to be turned around very quickly, because the comics industry works extremely fast compared to book publishing. Like
yeah.
in comics, you can go from blank page to on the shelves in 6 weeks,
Wow, yeah. Wow,
which
that's
is just impossible in books.
well,
It
yeah. You
cannot
would
be
never
done.
do that. You're talking years, aren't you? If you're
Yeah.
lucky.
Exactly, exactly. So, I mean, that's extreme, but a normal turnaround time in comics is like 2 to 3 months
Yeah.
from me writing a script to it being on the shelves. So, yes, sometimes you do have to kind of, I don't wanna use the word churn, but you know what I mean? You have to really sort of
Hmm.
produce the material and work
Yeah.
fast.
Well, it's a deadline, isn't it? That deadline that I mean, you do have that as a writer in a novel, but not that to that degree in any
No.
shape or form, is it?
Exactly, exactly. But it's commercial art, and there's two words in that phrase, and one of them is commercial.
Yeah.
It has to go out on sale. So it has to be good enough to be sold. You can't be a perfectionist in comics because, as I say, the industry moves so quickly. So there's a little less pressure in that sense,
Yeah.
because yeah, nobody's expecting you to produce War and Peace or something, but
No.
there is actually a lot of pressure in those very short deadlines, and in the fact that you are playing in shared universes.
Yeah.
So there was a case, I won't go into details to save everybody's blushes, but there were several cases when I was working at Marvel where I wanted to do something in a story and I literally just couldn't because somebody else was using a character in another story that had basically higher priority than mine,
Yeah.
or there was a similar story being done in another book that had
Ah,
already been
interesting.
drawn, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a very different kind of pressure, but it is a real one, and it's the sort of thing that can keep you awake at night sometimes.
Yeah, I hadn't really ever thought of that because I mean, I have sort of dabbled in a bit of, but not yet to any sort of degree. But I actually hadn't ever thought about that sort of that someone else may have already had that idea given to
Yeah.
them to do, or yeah, that must be a bit frustrating at times if you.
Just a little, yes.
Yeah, that's very
Whereas at
well
least
very
here,
well
I
done.
at least here with books, I am the master of my own world, like,
Yeah.
what I say goes, so
I
that's
guess
quite
that's the thing though,
quite
isn't
nice.
it? I guess like being able to play in the Marvel world is something that most, a lot of people who read comic books would dream of. But then on the other hand, you aren't the master of your own sort of
Right.
universe. And I, as such, well, as master of the universe, that's a bit of a pun there, but.
Well, like I said, I did it for a couple of years, and I had a lot of fun, and I got paid, and, it raised my profile in the community and what have you, and it was great. I'm not complaining about it, but
No,
yes, it is very different to being the master of your own destiny for sure.
yeah. And also you did you've written books with, you say you what's the word? I can't remember, think of the word now. The I'm thinking of the Anthony Horowitz books.
Oh, I
Um,
adapt the Alex Rider books.
Adapted, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. It's nearly 8 o'clock. It's my brain's shutting down. Adapted, yes. Was that quite, again, was that because the book had already been written in, so you had the plot and the characters. Was that interesting to do? Was
Oh,
it
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Some of my earliest work in comics was adapting, prose short stories, and in one case, a screenplay by Alan Moore into
Yeah.
comics. So yeah, I'm quite used to doing it. I've done a fair few adaptations.
Mm.
And yeah, the Alex Rider books are great. It's
That's it,
fun to
Alex
adapt.
Rider. I was trying to think of the
Yeah,
name.
because I mean, they're great books. They are genuinely, I've got them all on my bookshelf here
Yeah, no,
behind me,
they
you know,
are. My kids have all read them. They
yeah.
love them.
They're great books. Anthony is one of those authors who I will buy anything sight unseen because
Yeah.
he's so good. He's maddeningly good at pretty much everything that he turns his hand to. And yeah, so the Alex Rider books, they're great fun. Adapting them is good fun. I do them not in full collaboration with Anthony, but he has full approval over everything.
Yeah.
So sort of when we started, he had to approve my selection as the adapter. And we've developed a good relationship since then, become friends, and now he
Yeah.
trusts me to do those books, but he still has oversight and he still reads every script,
Yeah.
and approves it before it gets drawn and goes to the artist and what have you. But yeah, they're great fun to do. They're hard work,
Mm.
especially because in the tradition of children's authors everywhere, Anthony's books, every book gets longer.
They do get yeah.
Every book
Yeah.
gets longer as you go along, but the graphic novels do not. So every book I have to cut
Oh, you have to
and
squish.
compress
Yeah.
more and more, yeah, to make it fit into 176 pages of graphic novel. So yeah, it's hard work,
That
but it
must be really difficult to cut it in a way. It's almost like, well, it's like film, I guess, in a
yeah,
way, is you
exactly.
yeah,
In a way
where
that
you're
still
sort of
makes sense, still is
yeah,
kind of faithful and true to the book, so that people who've read both can feel, "Oh, yes, this is the same story."
it's sort of
Yeah,
true to the original sort of thing, yeah.
exactly, yeah. It is tough, but it's fun, and the thing is that almost all of my focus is on that because, as you say, the story's already written.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about actually making up the plot. I just have to worry about how I can present it in this new medium and take advantage of that medium to present it in the best way. Like there's things we have a regular thing in the Alex graphic novels where he receives a briefing every book from
Yeah.
MI6, and we do that with floating, what we call floating heads, which are literally just somebody's head on a black background dotted around the page with speech bubbles against images that are being shown effectively on a slideshow. So the kind of thing you would expect to see almost in a spy film, and that's become a regular. That doesn't happen in the books, but it's become a regular
Sort of
device that we
yeah,
use in the graphic novels because it works really well there. It's the
yeah,
sort of thing that, as a visual medium, yeah, is just really effective in the graphic novels and allows us actually to do a lot of that compression and get a lot of information into just like 3 or 4
Yeah,
pages, and
really
then bang, you know,
fascinating.
you're off and Alex is off running around and skiing down mountains again.
Um, I see we're nearly at 8 o'clock, which is it's gone so quickly. Um, this is one of those questions I should have asked you before, but I'm going to put you on the spot and
Oh, no.
say, um, what do you said you read quite broadly. Have you read anything recently that you would recommend to us watching this evening?
Ah, do you know, I mean, yes, but recently what I've actually been doing, and I think I'm sure you'll understand why, I've actually been rereading a lot of things like Agatha Christie and MC Beaton and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, just to kind of, because I read them years ago and I'm like, I should probably reread them because I'm likely to get asked about that sort of thing. Um, s- so, but let me have a look. Luckily for you, I track all my reading on Goodreads. So
Ah,
let me just
well,
get my recent reading up on Goodreads and
yeah, I can never.
see.
I normally ask, and when I was speaking to Helen, I thought I must go, and then I forgot. So yeah. So apologies. I do normally ask because I know if somebody asks me, I can never remember the last book I read.
Yeah, no, I'm terrible. I'm terrible. So here's a good series for you, kind of along the same lines. There is an author called Bonnie McBird, American author living in London, who does Sherlock Holmes continuation novels. I
Oh,
just read the
interesting.
third one of those. It's called The Devil's Due, and it was very good. All of her
Interesting.
Holmes books are very good. The first one in her series is called Art in the Blood, and I highly recommend those. Bonnie is a lovely person, but also a great writer. She's used to be a screenwriter and producer in Hollywood many years ago, and now, as I say, writes novels. What else? The Translator by Harriet Crawley. That's technically a spy novel. Well, no, I would say technically it's a thriller.
Hmm.
It's kind of like a spy novel, except there isn't actually much espionage going on. I read that because I was on a panel with Harriet at Crime Fest last weekend,
Oh, yeah.
and that was really good. I really enjoyed that. Harriet lived and worked in Russia for 20 years,
Oh, I
and
think I might have heard it. I heard somebody talking about that before.
well, and it's
It
her
sounded,
first novel for nearly 30 years.
yeah, it sounded
Uh,
fascinating.
Yeah, but it's really good. Like her character work is superb. You know, the sort of the
Mm,
characters really live and breathe on the page. And she clearly knows the world of Russia and of translation and stuff, work and stuff like that. You can just tell that, you know,
mm.
she really knows what she's talking about. Um, oh, and here's a cozy one that I read recently that I really liked: The Dinner Lady Detectives by Hannah Hendy.
Oh,
That
the Dinner
was
Lady Detectives. I haven't heard of that one.
I hadn't
That sounds very
until
cozy.
I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw it and I was like, "Oh, that sounds like something I'd enjoy." Yeah, and I really like that. That's the first. I think she's done 3, and she's got a 4th coming out.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
the whole series is called the Dinner Lady Detective series, and the first one, much like mine, much like the Dog Sitter Detective, that's what the name
Yeah.
of the series will be. But the first book is just called that, and yeah, it's the same with the Dinner Lady Detectives. It's filled with kind of absurd and larger than life characters. It's very humorous, very light-hearted. But also, even though the characters are absurd, they feel real. Like, you know, there's a lot of the stuff in the relationships where you go, "Yeah, I know people like that."
Sam saying Hannah was on our Cozy Fest, and
Oh,
she will be back this year. So
excellent. Well, there you go.
yeah, that sounds really good. Well, that actually leads us nicely back to talking about the Dog Sitter Detective, which thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us this evening.
You're welcome.
I'm going to put it here. It's a lovely book. It's a great read. I chortled my way through it. I can't wait to read book 2. I'm a bit annoyed that I have to wait until January for it, but I hope you'll come back on and chat with us again about Gwynnie and what happens to her when she goes house sitting in Little Venice. It'll be interesting.
I'd be
Um,
delighted to, yeah.
that would be brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who's joined us this evening. Apologies for the slightly delayed start, but the tech cavalry came in and saved me and Antony this evening. So thank you to Sam and Kaz for your support. So good night, and I am back tomorrow evening. We've got 2 this week with Bernard O'Keefe. And we're going to be chatting at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening about his second book. Laura says, thank you, Antony. But Antony's books sound fascinating. So that's
excellent.
a good way to end. Thanks, Antony. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to everybody for coming along this evening.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you all for watching. It's been great.
Thank you.